Do not take another step. The roof is breaking under you. Caleb Warren froze in the white silence between the pines. The child's voice had not come from the trail ahead, or from the slope behind him. It had risen from beneath his boots. Fog wrapped Blackwater Ridge so tightly that the nearest trees looked like charcoal shadows floating in milk. Caleb could see less than 20 feet in any direction. His flashlight formed a pale circle that died against the mist, revealing wet needles, mountain laurel, and the sable back of the German shepherd standing several yards ahead. Scout had stopped without warning. His body was low, ears forward, amber eyes fixed on the ground between them. Caleb did not move. A thin crack ran through the leaves near the toe of his boot. At first it looked like a dark root. Then the earth shifted beneath it, releasing a breath of cold, damp air. "Can you hear me?" Caleb called. The forest swallowed his words. For 3 seconds, there was only water dripping from pine branches and the steady sound of Scout breathing. Then the voice returned, faint but controlled. "Yes. Please step backward slowly. The wood above me is falling apart." Caleb shifted his weight 1 inch at a time. The hidden surface beneath the leaves creaked. He moved his right foot back, found solid earth, then brought the other beside it. A section of rotted timber sank where he had been standing, opening a narrow black seam under the forest floor. Scout approached the edge, lowered his nose and whined softly. Around his faded rescue collar was a red scarf, tied in a hurried knot and darkened by rain. Caleb crouched several feet away and pressed one palm against the wet ground. The opening smelled of cold soil, old wood, rusted metal and standing water. "My name is Caleb," he said. "What is yours?" "Aaliyah Brooks." Her answer came through roots and broken boards. "Young. Frightened. Still trying not to sound frightened." "How old are you, Aaliyah?" 10. Caleb removed his glove and held his fingers near the crack. Air moved upward from a hollow space beneath him. "Are you hurt?" "My ankle hurts, but I can move my toes. I fell onto leaves and dirt." Scout lay down beside the opening, muzzle nearly touching the gap. "Is this your dog?" Caleb asked. "Scout." The shepherd's ears lifted at his name. "I told him to find someone." Caleb looked back into the fog. The trail had vanished. So had the road, his truck, and every familiar point of direction. Only the brass compass in his jacket pocket told him which way was north. "He found me," Caleb said. Aaliyah released a small breath that might have been relief. Water dripped somewhere below her in a slow, hollow rhythm. Caleb took out his telephone. One bar appeared, disappeared, then returned. He called emergency services, gave the dispatcher the satellite coordinates from his navigation device, described the hidden structure, the unstable roof, the child below, and the heavy fog blocking visibility. The dispatcher told him ground rescue was being sent. No helicopter could enter the ridge in those conditions. Caleb ended the call and studied the broken surface. It was not a natural sinkhole. Straight timbers crossed beneath the soil. Rusted hinges showed through the leaves. Someone had built a roof here, then forgotten it. "Aaliyah, do you see a door or another opening?" he asked. Her flashlight moved below, creating a weak golden shimmer through the crack. "There is a metal door on one wall, but dirt is against it. Water is coming through the roots." "How deep?" "Maybe 2 inches." Scout suddenly stood and moved toward a thick wall of mountain laurel east of the opening. He touched the branches with his nose, returned to Caleb, then went back to the same place. Once, twice. On the 3rd time he waited there and looked over his shoulder. Caleb saw a straight line beneath the moss, too even to be stone. A buried wall. Perhaps an entrance. Then Aaliyah's voice rose from below, quieter than before. "Mr. Caleb, the water is getting faster." 2 hours earlier, Caleb Warren stood at the head of a conference table in Asheville, while rain blurred the Blue Ridge Mountains beyond the glass. On the screen behind him, an aerial map showed Blackwater Ridge divided into development zones, service roads, veteran recovery cabins, and a planned eco-resort built along the eastern slope. Every number promised progress. The project would create jobs, restore damaged trails, and fund a rehabilitation center for former service members. Yet one page in the survey packet bothered him. Caleb was 45, a white American billionaire, the founder of Warren Land and Infrastructure, and a former gunnery sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. Years of wealth had taught people to answer him quickly. Years in uniform had taught him that quick answers were often the ones worth checking twice. He studied the terrain map again. The ridge lines were marked. The drainage routes were marked. Old fire roads, abandoned utility trenches, and former ranger buildings were marked. But near the eastern trail, a blank rectangle interrupted the contour lines, as if someone had erased a structure without correcting the land beneath it. Nolan Pierce, the regional development director, stood beside the projection screen with a polished folder under one arm. "The old station was removed years ago," he said. "The county records are incomplete, but the safety team confirmed there are no active structures underground." Caleb looked up. No structures they could see? Nolan paused. The site was heavily overgrown. The team relied on the forestry map and earlier inspection photographs. Caleb turned to the final approval page. His electronic signature from the previous development phase appeared at the bottom, authorizing trail clearing and preliminary access work. Why are the historical markers missing from this version? They were outdated. Who removed them? The survey crew took down several signs so equipment could move through the junction. The answer was calm, but it arrived too carefully. Caleb closed the packet. Were replacements installed? Nolan glanced toward the engineers seated along the wall. No one answered. Outside, low cloud rolled over the mountains and erased the farthest peaks. A weather alert appeared on Caleb's telephone, warning of dense fog and heavy rain across the western counties. One investor leaned forward. "We can delay the site visit. The contract can be signed here." Caleb placed the unsigned agreement inside his leather-filled bag. "A map that removes a warning before removing the danger is not ready for my signature." He left without an assistant or security team and drove west in an old green Ford pickup equipped with basic survey gear, a first aid kit, reflective clothing, a flashlight, and the brass compass he had carried since his final deployment. The highway narrowed as it climbed. Farms disappeared behind wet trees. Fog gathered in the valleys, then rose across the road in slow white bands. Caleb reduced his speed. He hated low visibility. Years earlier, during an overseas training mission, he had lost radio contact with a Marine moving through dust so thick that distance became meaningless. The man had been found safely, but the memory remained. A voice cut off an empty channel, the helplessness of not knowing where to look. Caleb told himself this drive was only an inspection. He would photograph the missing markers, verify the terrain, and return before dark. At the entrance to Blackwater Ridge, the main trail sign stood crooked beside the road. Orange survey ribbon fluttered where a directional marker should have been. He parked, checked his compass, and stepped into the fog. Less than 10 minutes later, a German shepherd emerged from the white air and stopped directly in his path. Around the dog's rescue collar, someone had tied a small red scarf. Earlier that afternoon, 10-year-old Aaliyah Brooks walked beside her grandmother along the public trail at Blackwater Ridge, carrying a small camera, a red rescue whistle, and a notebook for her local history project. She was a Black American girl with warm brown skin, careful braids, and observant brown eyes that missed very little. A yellow raincoat protected her from the first light drops falling through the trees. Scout moved several feet ahead, his sable coat darkening in the damp air, then returned whenever the path narrowed. Denise Brooks had walked that ridge for more than 20 years. She knew where the trail curved around the granite outcrop, where wild blueberries grew in summer, and where old stone markers showed the route once used by families living farther up the mountain. "Photograph the markers, not just the pretty trees," Denise reminded her. "History is usually hiding in the things people stop noticing." Aaliyah smiled and raised her camera toward a waist-high stack of stones beside the path. A small metal plaque had once been fixed to the top, but only 2 rusted screws remained. She wrote the location in her notebook. According to Denise, those markers had guided children to school, neighbors to church, and rescue teams during winter storms before the modern road was built. Farther ahead, orange survey ribbon fluttered from young branches. It looked bright against the gray woods. The fog arrived without drama. One moment Aaliyah could see the next bend. The next, pale cloud slipped between the trees and softened every edge. The mountain disappeared one trunk at a time. Denise stopped near a junction where a county forestry employee was checking a damaged trail barrier. "The lower route may be closed," he said. A survey crew moved some signs this morning. Aaliyah remained a few yards away, photographing another stone marker while Scout sniffed the wet ground. The dog lifted his head toward a strip of orange ribbon tied beyond the junction. Aaliyah saw no warning sign, only the ribbon leading along a narrow path that appeared to curve back toward the main trail. "Grandma, I am getting the next marker," she called. Denise raised one hand without turning. "Stay where I can see you." Aaliyah walked less than 50 yards before the mist thickened. The orange ribbon appeared again ahead, then vanished behind Mountain Laurel. Scout slowed. Aaliyah turned to look back. Denise and the forestry worker were gone behind the white air. "Grandma!" Her voice traveled into the trees and returned as a softer echo. She lifted the red whistle and blew 3 short notes. The sound bounced from the rocky slope, seeming to come from the west, then north, then somewhere behind her. Denise answered faintly, but the fog twisted the direction. Aaliyah stepped toward the voice. Scout blocked the path. He stood sideways in front of her, ears raised, then looked east. "Do you know the way?" she asked. The German shepherd moved forward, stopping every few yards to make sure she followed. Aaliyah marked branches with small pieces of white paper from her notebook, but the damp pages softened quickly. They had gone less than a quarter mile when the trail ribbon ended beside the crumbling stone foundation of an old ranger station. The roof was gone. Ferns filled the doorway. Aaliyah recognized the place from a faded photograph in the county archive, though the map in her assignment said it had been removed. Rain began to fall harder. "We will wait under the trees and whistle again," she told Scout. The dog moved toward the foundation, then stopped and growled softly at the ground. Beneath the leaves, something hollow answered when the rain struck it. Aaliyah raised her camera and took one photograph. The flash revealed a straight wooden edge under the moss. Then the fog closed around them, and somewhere beneath the leaves, old timber gave a quiet warning creak. Aaliyah held the camera close to her chest and stepped around the edge of the old foundation. Scout moved in front of her, nose low, then stopped with one paw raised. The ground beneath the leaves looked solid, but the sound below it was wrong. "Hollow." Aaliyah crouched and brushed away a layer of wet pine needles. A weathered plank appeared beneath the moss, gray with age and split along one side. "This was not removed," she whispered. She lifted the camera and took another photograph. The flash reflected from a rusted hinge buried near the roots. Rain struck the hidden boards more heavily now, each drop tapping against the old timber like fingers on a locked door. Scout gave a low warning sound. Aaliyah stepped backward, but the heel of her boot caught beneath a vine. Her weight shifted. The plank under her right foot bent. A crack traveled across the covered surface. "Scout back," she called. The German shepherd jumped toward solid ground as the leaves beneath Aaliyah sank. She reached for a branch, but it slipped through her wet hand. The old roof gave way in a slow, groaning collapse, and she slid through the opening with soil, leaves, and broken pieces of wood. The fall was less than 8 feet, but darkness made it feel deeper. She landed on a thick bed of damp leaves and loose earth that softened the impact, then rolled onto one side as dust drifted around her flashlight beam. For several seconds she did not move. Above her, Scout barked sharply into the opening. "I am okay," Aaliyah said, though her breath came fast. She sat up carefully. Her left ankle hurt, but when she moved her toes they responded. Her hands were scraped with dirt, not blood. The camera still hung from its strap, and the red rescue whistle remained clipped to her raincoat. She looked around. The room was narrow, perhaps 12 feet long, with stone walls and heavy wooden beams supporting what remained of the roof. Rusted shelves leaned against one side. A metal door stood beneath a mound of soil at the eastern wall. Water dripped through roots overhead and gathered in shallow lines across the floor. Scout lowered his head through the broken opening, whining as he searched for a safe way down. "No," Aaliyah told him. "Stay up there." She stood slowly, keeping most of her weight on her right leg. The walls were too high to climb, and loose dirt fell whenever she touched them. She found an old storage crate and dragged it beneath the opening, but even standing on it left her several feet below the edge. "Grandma!" she shouted. Her voice struck the stone and returned from 2 directions. No answer came. She blew 3 short notes on the red whistle. The sound rose through the opening, crossed the ridge and vanished into the fog. Far away, another whistle answered, but the echo made it impossible to tell where it came from. Scout barked toward the west, then turned east, confused by the reflected sound. Aaliyah looked at the water spreading beneath the shelves. It was only a thin layer, but the rain was growing stronger. She removed the small red scarf tied around her wrist, the one her grandmother had given her for trail days, and reached as high as she could. "Scout, take it." The dog lowered his muzzle. Aaliyah looped the scarf through his rescue collar and pulled the knot tight. Then she placed one hand against his chest through the opening. "Find someone," she said. Scout did not move. "Go." He backed away, disappeared into the fog, then returned less than a minute later and lay beside the hole. Aaliyah swallowed the fear rising in her throat. "You cannot stay with me." She pointed toward the trail. "Find someone, Scout. Bring them back." The dog left again. Once more he returned. The third time, Aaliyah blew the whistle, waited until he looked at her, and gave the command with all the calm she could gather. "Find someone." Scout stood very still. Then he turned and ran into the white forest, the red scarf bright against his wet collar. Aaliyah listened until his paws faded beyond the trees. Alone beneath the roots, she raised her flashlight and saw water beginning to seep under the eastern door. Scout ran through the white forest with the red scarf bright against his wet collar. The fog erased the trail almost as soon as he crossed it. Pine trunks appeared, vanished, and appeared again. Water gathered along his whiskers. He stopped once beside the old junction, listening for Aaliyah's whistle, but the mountain gave him only broken echoes. Then an engine moved somewhere beyond the trees. Low, steady, close enough to reach. Scout followed the sound toward the access road and emerged from the mist 20 feet in front of Caleb Warren. Caleb stopped immediately. The German shepherd did not bark. He approached, pressed his nose against Caleb's hand, then turned and ran back into the fog. Caleb watched him disappear. A moment later, Scout returned. He touched Caleb's hand again, ran several yards toward the trees and looked back. "You want me to follow," Caleb said. Scout vanished once more. When Caleb still did not move, the dog came back a third time. This time, Caleb noticed the red scarf tied around his rescue collar, and the fresh mud along his legs. It was not decoration. It was a message. Caleb returned to his Ford, grabbed a flashlight, reflective vest, first aid kit, compact rope, and the brass compass from his field bag. He sent his location to the project office, then stepped off the road. "Lead me." Scout moved quickly, but he never traveled farther than Caleb could see. Every few seconds he stopped inside the gray veil and waited. The trail behind them disappeared after 30 yards. Caleb checked the compass and marked their direction in his telephone, but the signal weakened as they descended. Wet branches brushed his shoulders. The air smelled of pine sap, cold stone, and leaves beginning to rot beneath the rain. Somewhere to the west, a whistle sounded. Caleb turned toward it. Scout did not. The dog remained facing east. Another whistle came, apparently from behind them now. Fog and rock were bending the sound. Caleb remembered the missing trail marker from the survey report. A person trusting the echo could walk in circles until darkness. "Stay with the dog," he told himself. Scout crossed a shallow stream, climbed through mountain laurel, and stopped beside a patch of disturbed leaves. Caleb saw the place where the old roof had collapsed. Broken boards formed a dark opening under roots and moss. Scout lay at the edge and whined. "Aaliyah," Caleb called. His voice dropped into the hollow space and returned softer. For a moment no one answered. Then a child spoke from below. "Scout." The shepherd's tail struck the wet ground once. Caleb lowered himself several feet from the opening, spreading his weight across solid soil. "My name is Caleb. Scout found me." Aaliyah released a shaky breath. "Do not come closer. The roof is weak." Caleb studied the leaves in front of him. A thin fracture ran through the hidden boards near his boot. He moved backward slowly. Part of the timber sank where he had been standing. "Thank you," he said. "Are you hurt?" "My ankle hurts, but I can move it. The water is coming under the metal door now." "How deep?" "Almost 2 inches." Caleb took out his telephone. One bar appeared. He called emergency services, gave the dispatcher the satellite coordinates, described the buried structure, the unstable roof, and the heavy fog blocking aerial access. Ground rescue was sent from the county station. Caleb ended the call and looked at Scout. The dog rose, crossed to a thick wall of mountain laurel east of the opening, then returned. Once, twice. On the third time he stayed there and stared back. Caleb pushed aside the wet branches from a safe distance. Beneath the moss, a straight line of rusted metal ran through the soil. A buried wall. Perhaps a door. From below, water struck stone with a faster rhythm. Then Aaliyah called through the roots, "Quieter now. Mr. Caleb, I think something just moved behind the east wall." Caleb moved closer to the eastern edge without stepping onto the buried roof. "Aaliyah, tell me exactly what you heard." He lowered himself onto solid ground and pressed one ear near the narrow opening between the roots. Scout stood beside the mountain laurel, body still, nose aimed at the rusted line beneath the moss. "It sounded like metal bending," Aaliyah said. Then water came through faster. Caleb shone his flashlight along the exposed edge of the hidden wall. Rain had washed away enough soil to reveal the upper corner of a steel door, its frame tilted beneath years of roots and red clay. Water was likely collecting outside it and forcing its way through the lower seam. "Do you smell gasoline, chemicals, or anything sharp?" he asked. "Only wet dirt and old wood." "Good. Is your flashlight still working?" "Yes, but it is getting dim." "Turn it off for 10 seconds at a time. Save the battery." Caleb opened the first aid kit and removed a reflective emergency blanket. He tied it between two branches above the broken roof, creating a small shield that redirected some of the rain away from the opening. It would not stop the water beneath the door, but it might slow what entered through the roots. "Can you see anything on the metal wall?" he asked. Aaliyah switched on her light again. "There is a handle, but dirt is covering half of it. There are white letters. Read whatever you can." She paused. "Maintenance access. East side." Caleb looked at Scout. The German shepherd touched the buried frame with his nose, then returned to the opening above Aaliyah. He had not chosen a rescue route. He had found the place where her scent and voice traveled most clearly. Caleb photographed the door from a safe distance and sent the image to the emergency dispatcher with a message describing the eastern access. The telephone signal weakened, but the photograph finally transmitted. "The rescue team is coming on foot," the dispatcher told him. "Fog has reduced visibility to less than 50 feet along the upper road. Estimated arrival is 12 minutes. Caleb ended the call without repeating the number to Aaliyah. 12 minutes could feel like an hour beneath the ground. "Tell me about your ankle," he said. "Is the pain getting worse?" "Only when I stand." "Then stay seated. Keep your back against the stone wall, not the wooden beams." Scout lowered himself beside Caleb's hand. Water dripped from the dog's coat onto the leaves. "My grandma is looking for me," Aaliyah said. "She heard my whistle, but the sound went the wrong way." "The mountain is bending the echo," Caleb replied. "Your grandmother will be told where you are." "How do you know?" "Because I gave the rescue team your coordinates." The word steadied her breathing. Caleb heard it through the crack. "Slow in. Slow out. Do you have your camera?" he asked. "Yes." "Take one photograph of the door and one of the water level. The flash may help you see details without leaving the light on." Aaliyah followed the instruction. 2 brief flashes glowed beneath the roots. "The water is a little above 2 inches near the door," she said. "It is lower where I am sitting. Stay there." A distant whistle sounded through the fog. Scout raised his head. Caleb listened. 3 short notes. A pause. 3 more. Aaliyah answered with her red whistle from below, but the sound emerged from the forest in several directions at once. Caleb took out the brass compass and placed it flat on the ground. "The rescue team may hear the wrong echo," he said. "We will give them something they can trust." He removed the reflective vest from his pack, tied it high between 2 pine trunks, and switched his flashlight to its slow emergency pulse. A pale beam blinked through the white air. Then a radio voice crackled faintly from somewhere uphill. Caleb stood and called once clearly without leaving Aaliyah's side. "This way. Follow the light." Scout remained beside the eastern door. Beneath them, Aaliyah suddenly stopped speaking. "Aaliyah." Caleb pressed closer to the opening. No answer. The water continued tapping against stone. Then, after 3 long seconds, her voice returned in a whisper. Mr. Caleb, the door handle is moving. Caleb kept his voice low. Do not touch the handle, Aaliyah. Move away from the east wall and stay against the stone. Beneath the roots, water shifted around her boots. It is turning by itself, she whispered. Caleb looked toward the buried frame. The handle moved again, barely an inch, then stopped. Pressure from the water and softened earth was forcing the old mechanism inward. Scout rose and stepped between the hidden door and the opening above Aaliyah. Ears forward, body rigid. Back from the door, Caleb repeated. Tell me when you are against the far wall. Aaliyah dragged the storage crate across the damp floor and lowered herself beside it. I am there. A radio crackled through the fog. Pale helmet lights appeared between the trees, floating like distant stars in the white air. Fire Captain Rosa Martinez reached the site first, followed by 4 rescue specialists carrying ropes, air monitors, ground probes, a flexible camera, and equipment for stabilizing weak structures. Rain shone on their yellow jackets. Caleb met Rosa several yards from the broken roof and gave her the facts without leaving Aaliyah's hearing range. 10-year-old girl. Conscious. Possible ankle injury. Water slightly above 2 inches near the east door. Roof is unstable. The handle has started moving under pressure. There may be an exterior maintenance access beneath the laurel. Rosa studied the fractured timbers, the buried steel line, and Scout's position. Has anyone stepped onto the roof? Only me before she warned me. I backed away. Good. Caleb pointed toward the eastern wall. I can clear the brush while your team prepares. Rosa looked directly at him. Were you trained for collapsed underground structures? I was a gunnery sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. That does not answer my question. Her tone was not disrespectful. It was final. Your job is to keep her answering. Our job is to reach her safely. Caleb felt the old instinct rise inside him, the need to move toward danger, to prove usefulness through action. Scout pressed his shoulder against Caleb's leg. The dog did not need him to lead. Aaliyah needed him to stay. Caleb nodded. Understood. Rosa assigned 2 rescuers to probe the soil around the eastern frame, while another placed lightweight support panels across the solid ground near the roof. A 4th firefighter prepared a backup line and monitored the air through the opening. Aaliyah, Caleb called, kneeling beside the roots. The rescue team is here. Her answer came quickly. How many people? 5, including the captain. Is Scout still there? Caleb rested one hand on the shepherd's wet neck. He has not moved more than a few feet from you. Aaliyah exhaled softly. Tell him he did good. Scout's ears lifted when Caleb repeated her words. Rosa's team cleared the mountain laurel without pulling on the buried frame. Under the roots, they found a narrow seam along the eastern wall. One rescuer inserted the flexible camera through a gap no wider than a finger. The screen showed packed soil, rusted metal, and standing water on the other side. Possible access, he said. But the frame is under pressure. Rosa ordered them to establish drainage before opening it. A shallow channel was cut through the soil downhill from the door, giving the trapped water outside the frame somewhere to escape. Caleb heard the flow change beneath the leaves. The handle stopped moving, Aaliyah said. Good. Stay where you are. A whistle sounded from the north. Then another answered from the west. Denise was somewhere in the fog with a ranger team, following echoes that refused to tell the truth. Rosa checked her radio. Her grandmother is safe. They are bringing her around by the marked route. Caleb relayed the message. Aaliyah was silent for a moment. Then she said, I knew she would keep looking. One of Rosa's rescuers called from the eastern wall. Camera found the lower hinge. Door opens outward, but the company map shows the entrance 20 yards north. Rosa frowned. Then the map is wrong. Scout left Caleb's side, crossed to the laurel, and sat beside the buried frame. He looked back once. Not commanding. Confirming. Rosa watched him, then turned to her team. Verify the east side with the forestry archive before we open anything. Caleb lowered his face closer to the roots. Aaliyah, they found the door. No answer came. Aaliyah. The fog seemed to swallow even the rain. Caleb waited. Then 3 weak notes rose through the ground from the red whistle. A pause followed. One final note. Scout stood. Caleb looked at Rosa. She is still conscious, he said. But she is getting tired. Rosa Martinez requested the oldest forestry map available, while her team continued draining the soil around the eastern frame. A county ranger answered over the radio, his voice breaking through static as he searched the archive from a truck parked below the ridge. The current map shows a filled foundation north of your position, he said. The 1978 maintenance plan shows an exterior door on the east wall. Rosa looked toward the rusted frame beneath the mountain laurel. Send the original drawing. Caleb remained beside the opening above Aaliyah, one hand resting on the wet ground and the other on Scout's collar. They are checking an older map, he told her. You only need to keep answering me. Aaliyah's voice was faint. I am listening. Tell me 5 things you can see. She moved her flashlight slowly. The metal door. 2 shelves. My camera. A broken lantern. Scout's paws through the opening. The German shepherd lowered his head when she said his name. Good, Caleb replied. Now tell me 4 things you can feel. Cold air. Wet socks. The stone behind me. My whistle in my hand. Caleb kept his tone steady, using the simple exercise to hold her attention while the rescuers worked. The fog thickened around the site, swallowing the red emergency lights until they became soft circles between the trees. Denise Brooks arrived with 2 rangers along the marked approach route. Her yellow rain jacket was soaked, and fear tightened every line of her face. She moved toward the broken roof, but Rosa stopped her before she crossed the safety boundary. Your granddaughter is conscious, Rosa said. We have a verified access point, and the team is preparing to open it. Denise pressed both hands together beneath her chin. Can she hear me? Caleb shifted closer to the roots. Aaliyah, your grandmother is here. Silence followed. Then a small voice rose from below. Grandma. Denise knelt several feet from the opening. I am right here, baby. I am not leaving. Scout stood between them, looking from the grandmother to the ground as if counting every voice that had returned. A message arrived on Rosa's tablet. The old plan showed the eastern door opening outward into a narrow drainage corridor that sloped downhill. It also showed 2 support beams crossing above the entrance. One was missing from the company survey. We do not pull the door, Rosa said. We stabilize the roof, expose both hinges, and relieve the remaining water pressure first. Her team placed inflatable support cushions beneath the strongest section of the roof from the exterior edge, then added timber braces along the eastern wall. A rescuer used a hand tool to clear soil around the lower hinge, while another monitored movement with a laser gauge. Nothing shifted. Frame is holding, the rescuer reported. Caleb heard Aaliyah breathing through the opening. The water is lower now, she said. Maybe 1 inch. That is good, he answered. Keep your back against the stone. Denise began speaking softly about the porch at home, the warm soup waiting in the kitchen, and the blanket Scout always stole from the couch. Aaliyah gave a tired laugh. The sound was quiet, but it changed the air around them. Rosa's team uncovered the second hinge and inserted a small camera through the seam. The screen showed Aaliyah seated safely against the far wall, her yellow raincoat bright in the dim room. Visual contact confirmed, Rosa said. Prepare 1 rescuer and 1 backup. The lead rescuer clipped into a safety line. A second rescuer stood fully harnessed behind him. The eastern door opened less than 6 inches, then stopped against packed soil inside the corridor. The team cleared it carefully until the gap reached 18 inches. Cool air moved through the chamber. Aaliyah turned toward the narrow beam of light. I can see you, the rescuer called. My name is Thomas. Stay exactly where you are. Caleb felt Scout's body loosen beside him for the first time. Then Thomas checked the ceiling inside the entrance and raised 1 hand. There is another problem, he said. The inner beam is resting against the door. If we open it farther, part of the roof may shift. Thomas remained at the narrow opening while Rosa studied the camera image. The inner beam lay diagonally across the top of the door, carrying part of the weakened roof. Opening the steel panel farther without support could shift the weight above Aaliyah. We stabilize from both sides, Rosa said. No cutting until the load is transferred. Her team slid 2 compact lifting cushions through the 18-inch gap and positioned them beneath the beam using long-handled tools. Thomas watched the movement through the camera, while a second rescuer monitored the roof with the laser gauge. Caleb stayed beside the broken opening, speaking through the roots. Aaliyah, they can see you. They are supporting the wood above the door before anyone comes inside. How long? She asked. Only as long as it takes to do it safely. Denise remained nearby, repeating small details about home whenever Aaliyah's voice weakened. Scout lay between them with his muzzle against the ground. The cushions inflated slowly. The beam lifted less than 2 inches, just enough for the team to slide a timber brace beneath it. Nothing else moved. Load transferred, one rescuer reported. Rosa ordered the lower soil cleared and the door opened another foot. Cold air passed through the chamber. Thomas entered on a safety line, moving carefully beneath the supported beam. A backup rescuer remained harnessed at the doorway. I am with her, Thomas said over the radio. He checked Aaliyah's ankle, wrapped it with a soft support, and helped her into a low rescue harness. The water is shallow, but the floor is uneven. We are bringing you out seated. Aaliyah held her camera in one hand and the red whistle in the other. Can Scout see me? Not yet, Caleb answered through the opening. But he knows exactly where you are. Thomas guided her onto a compact rescue sled. The team outside attached a line and pulled in slow, measured movements while he stayed beside her. 6 feet. 4 feet. 2. Then the yellow sleeve of Aaliyah's raincoat appeared through the eastern doorway. Denise covered her mouth with both hands. Scout rose but did not cross the safety boundary until Rosa gave permission. Firefighters lifted Aaliyah onto solid ground beneath a portable shelter and removed the harness. She looked past the medics immediately. Scout! The German shepherd crossed the wet leaves, slowed near her, and pressed his head against her chest. Aaliyah wrapped both arms around his neck. His body remained completely still, as though any movement might send her back into the fog. Denise knelt beside them and pulled the emergency blanket around all three. Caleb stood several yards away, rain collecting on his shoulders. He did not step into the reunion. He watched Aaliyah show her grandmother the camera that had survived the fall. On its screen was the photograph of the hidden roof, the rusted hinge, and the orange survey ribbon leading toward the danger. Rosa approached Caleb carrying a mud-stained metal marker recovered beside the eastern door. The lettering was faint but readable. Blackwater Ridge Storm Storage, East Access. Your company map says this structure was filled 20 years ago, she said. Caleb looked toward the collapsed roof. Then the map is wrong. A vehicle engine sounded through the fog. Nolan Pierce emerged between the trees with a waterproof document case under one arm. He stopped when he saw the rescue lights, Aaliyah beneath the shelter, and the old marker in Rose's hand. Caleb's expression changed. Tell me you brought the original inspection files. Nolan did not answer immediately. He opened the case and removed a set of photographs. Caleb recognized the approval code printed across the top. His own electronic signature appeared beneath it. Then Aaliyah lifted her camera and said quietly, "Those pictures are not from this place.